Welcome to the Kingdom-Minded Mompreneur, where we, Becky
and Monique, your new biz besties, both busy moms just like you.
We're here to talk all things network marketing, mom life, and how to truly live out your calling. We'll be dropping 2 episodes each week to help you, the busy mompreneur, know the exact strategies to build both your business and your home. You'll hear each week from one of the top network marketers on their best tips for what's led to their success and what's working now.
We know that you're here because you are called to something more. You have a desire to succeed in both your business and at home, and we are going to teach you how. If you love what you hear here on the podcast and want to be one of our success stories, join us inside our community, the Kingdom-Minded Mompreneur, where we provide a daily social media action plan, additional resources, kingdom coaching, and more. Click the show notes for the link to join. So let's get into the episode. We are so glad to have you here on the Kingdom-Minded Mompreneur. Hello, it's Monique.
And Becky.
Welcome. So we're really excited about today's conversation because this is a practical podcast where we're going to give you something that I honestly believe is going to be a game changer for a lot of you. Because, Becky and I have coached thousands of people at this point, and we notice patterns. A lot of times we notice the same things that come up over and over and over again. And one of those things is your mindset, and recognizing that you might be self-sabotaging, you might be holding yourself back from achieving success. And that can be because of your own thoughts, or it could also be because of the words that people say to you. So a lot of times we have to pause and evaluate and say, okay, how am I being affected by my own self-sabotaging, and how am I being affected by the words of other people? So Becky, I'm just curious, do you feel like you relate to this? Does this come up for you?
Yeah, I think in the beginning I think we all in general, right? Like just different aspects of our life, the thing that we are insecure the most about or that could affect us the most is sometimes what we're triggered by, I guess. Like if someone says something about it, like whether it's your motherhood or religion or politics or your business, right? Like we all have kind of something that might trigger us more than other areas of our life. And it's usually a kind of reflection of just life experiences, whether it's trauma or not, just in general. I think it can be kind of rooted from something that an experience, and I think too, as you just in general, I think as you have, whether it's with, wisdom with age or, whatever the reason is, just wisdom through experiences. I think right now I'm at a place where I can kind of discern, I can kind of walk myself through this process that we're about to unpack for our listeners. And that is to, kind of think through like, okay, let me consider the source, like, do I want, and would I be willing to trade places with their lifestyle, their relationships, their success? Would I trade places? Like, do I need to put any stock into what they are saying and speaking over me? Or, is it something that I need to, unpack with my therapist? Or do I need to, let it roll off my back, so to speak? So I think it just kind of, it's something that I have grown into, and I think is a huge struggle for people in this industry. I remember at the very beginning, of my journey, and feeling like almost a sense of shame and embarrassment, asking people to host a party or to, sign up and try the business or whatever. Right. And now I'm like, man, that poor girl, like that poor version of me that felt so much insecurity. And, I think the success that I've had helped significantly, right? Like now I'm just like, oh, whatever, it's not for you. Totally fine. Right. Like if I was still in the industry, I don't think it would bother me. But I definitely think it's definitely a pattern that we see with our clients and just in general.
Well, and I think you mentioned therapy. Both of us do therapy and we're big proponents of therapy, and we tell our clients to do therapy
Yeah.
because sometimes people think that they need a business strategy and they need therapy. Like
Yeah.
sometimes people think like, "Oh, I just need like this, strategy for this and everything will work out." And the reality is you have trauma you need to work through. You're being
Hmm.
triggered, or things from your childhood that you aren't don't believe are affecting you in adulthood are. And so that's a lot of it too. But we are going to give you a 5 question battle plan. So if you are a note taker, you want to write this down, or if you are listening as you're folding laundry, as you are working out, as you're on a road trip, you can come back and listen to this again and write it down, because we really want you to actually implement what we're going to give you. Okay, so we're going to give you a 5 question battle plan. And the time that you can use this is in the moment where maybe someone says something to you and you feel paralyzed, you feel frozen, you feel like, well, okay, maybe you're, I'm just gonna make up a scenario. You're reaching out to people, you're connecting with people, you're talking to them about the business opportunity, and somebody who you just knew would be interested in what it is that you're doing says no. But not only says no, they're like, I would never do anything like that. Like, what are you doing? Like, isn't that a pyramid scheme? Isn't that illegal? Right? And they're like bashing your character, or they say something about you or about your parenting or about something that, really hits to the core of a pain point. And so if something like this happens, we want you to have a 5 question battle plan.
Yes. So for me, when I think about this, I am the person that always wants the strategy, and I always want the, tactical and the action steps, right? To just overcome the thing. And so I think, what I love about this is it's easy to say to someone, oh, don't worry about that, right? Or just get over it, right? It's just don't worry about, like, oh, whatever. And so I think, though, when someone that you care about or you admire says something that's like really hurtful, or just like Monique said, like they are someone that you're like, man, I know this would be so great to do this with them, blah, blah, blah. Then when they reject you, right? They have this like you feel this sense of rejection. It's hurtful, it's painful, and it's not always easy to just roll it off, and just get over it. And so hopefully these questions, if you will take them to heart and consistently bring these up, whether you have it in a notebook, where maybe you have like a battle plan notebook that when something comes up, you have a place to kind of emotionally process, or like she said, like in therapy, or with we're going to give you some tips on a battle buddy. If you have people that you trust, this is going to be something that can really, truly change your life, I believe. So we'll give you the 5 questions first, and then we're going to unpack each one just briefly to kind of address why this question is relevant and important. So do you want to read the 5 questions?
Sure. Okay. So the very first question you're going to ask yourself is, who am I? Who am I? So you'll want to define that question. Ask yourself that question. The second question you'll ask yourself is, what has God called me to do? What has God called me to do? The third question is, what is the story I am telling myself based on what was just said? So if someone has just said something to you that triggers, what is the story I am telling myself based on what was just said? Number 4 is, what is the lie? And number 5 is, what is the truth?
Okay, so if we're going to dive into each of these briefly, I think, the first one, like some of them, it might even seem kind of silly. Like, why would I have to like think through this? But really, truly, like the first question, who am I? Thinking through, what is it that you know about yourself to be true, right? Like, who are you? What do you represent? Maybe even taking that question to God, in prayer and saying, who am I, Lord? Like, what are my gifts? What is it about me, that has given me this family, has given me this children, has given me this desire? What is it about me? And I think, there are obviously simple, answers that we can give, like, I'm a woman, I'm a whatever, but I think too, if someone, just as an example, if someone was to say, oh, you'll never have success with that or whatever, but you can recall a time in your life when, or even if they aren't saying it about you, but saying like, oh, doesn't most people, like she said, isn't that like a scam or something, or isn't that whatever? And well, I am an intellectual person, right? Like, I would never enter into something, right, without strategically, thinking through the outcome or the results or the effects or the consequence or whatever, right? And so I think just kind of taking a step back and thinking, like, having this sense of confidence and like rooting yourself in your core beliefs of who you are, what you stand for, and that in itself will give you, I'm not going to say it's just going to give you this burst of confidence and overnight, all of a sudden you're like, oh, nothing bothers me, because it's like, even at the top of the company, I had people say stuff and I'd be like, well, that was hurtful, and things still affect us, right? We're human.
Well,
But yeah,
I think also just recognizing, like, when you think about who am I, and think about, okay, I'm a child of God. Like,
yes.
I'm a child of God. I am chosen. I am set apart. I am created for a purpose. And I think sometimes when you think about that and then you go back and think about what someone just said to you, it really just like puts it in perspective
Hmm.
of like, oh, they can't touch me. Like,
Yeah,
nobody can cancel me. Nobody can stop me. Nobody,
that's right.
like, yeah. Okay. So that leads into the next question, which is, what has God called me to do? And I think that when you know what God has called you to do, you are unstoppable. And sometimes you may not know. There
Yeah.
were periods of my life where I wasn't exactly sure. I was just trying to figure that out, but we had shared in a previous episode about, I felt like God had called me to coach network marketers and to lead them in a certain way, like teach kingdom to network marketers. And when I had that clarity, like right now, I'm like, and both of us, Becky and I both know what our calling is. And so if somebody says, hey, you can't do that, or hey, what do you think you're doing? Like, yeah, it's going to be hurtful. Have we had those moments? Yes. Like,
Hmm.
it's going to be hurtful. But when you know that you know that you know the assignment, then you don't waver. You don't allow that to affect you. And a lot of times it's the enemy. And it's not even necessarily the person. Like, the enemy might be using someone else to say something hurtful to you, but it's not even about that person. Like, it's about um it really trying to come and distract you, being a tactic of the enemy. But I think when you know what God has called you to do, and so for a lot of you, that might be in your motherhood. When it might be that you're called to homeschool. Okay, maybe you're called to homeschool and you decide to make this transition, and somebody that you respect and love, maybe it's a family member, they're like, what are you doing? Like, you're homeschooling your kids. You're not a teacher. Like, who do you think you are?
Hmm.
And if you know that you are called to it, that trumps anything that anybody can say. And so I think sometimes it's so easy to be in this world where we are so caught up in what other people say and other
Hmm.
people's opinions. And
Yeah.
right now I'm going through like questioning everything about the school system, and anyway, and it's gotten me to even think like, okay, why am I just going along with all these different things? And so sometimes when you stand up for something or when you do something, you might be the only one, but if you know that God has called you, it makes it so much more clear for you to recognize, this is what I need to step into no matter what other people say.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So the third question, what is the story I am telling myself based on what was just said? So this question, I feel like I can relate to so much because I am someone who and, just based on circumstances and trauma and things that I have lived through and, trying to work through, I've recognized a pattern of, kind of racing thoughts that would essentially take me down this rabbit hole of concern and anxiety and overwhelm and almost like paralyze me to the point of all I can think about is this possible outcome that there's really no guarantee of that outcome happening, but it's like I'm so scared of this thing happening. And so I say that to say I have had to work through, recognizing when, and this is not necessarily something I've mastered by any means, but I think just recognizing when something is, someone is speaking truth over me and someone kind of discerning, like I said in the beginning, like their perspective and the source, considering, okay, what has just been said? What has been my experience with them? Right. And like, what am I now telling myself as a result of what they've said? Is that actual truth? Is it true? And so,
And
sometimes,
sometimes I think we can, sorry, Becky, I didn't
no,
interrupt you,
no,
but I
you're
think
fine.
sometimes we can turn things into things that aren't even like
Yes.
someone could say something and they
Mhm.
may actually not even be meaning anything by it.
Yeah.
And we can interpret it
Yes.
and make it become something.
Yes. Yes. I think there's definite, I mean, certainly, if you have been in a very toxic relationship with like your cousin or your mother-in-law or somebody, your husband, whoever, if you have been in a relationship that is strained and they say something to you, I do think, yes, there is a reason you're triggered and like a boundary needs to be in place to maybe limit their access to you, right? But then just like Monique said, like there could be times when someone that really truly loves you or, cares about you has said something. And for whatever reason, that comment has triggered this spiraling thoughts, racing thoughts that you then need to say, okay, is this a story or is this truth? Right? Like what is happening? Which I know that goes to the next questions. It's like, who is saying the thing, right? Like, what is it what hold do they have over? Because you're giving power to the person or the thing or whatever that is causing you to have this trigger, to have this reaction, right? And so it's like, don't waste the energy on something that either A is not true at all, or B is not someone that you should really ultimately be even listening to, and taking advice from or allowing them the ability to input, quote unquote, into your brain, right? Because that whatever you input is going to essentially determine your output, like what you're able to give access to, you know?
Yeah, and this isn't one of the questions, but consider the source. Like if it's
Mhm.
somebody who, maybe they have their own trauma and brokenness and maybe they aren't happy with themselves or where they want to be in their own lives and so they feel like by criticizing or tearing somebody else down that it makes them feel better about themselves. Or if somebody's struggling with something and,
Mhm.
they're trying to come at you, like just recognize where it's coming from, where it's what it's rooted in. It could be rooted in their own trauma, all of that. And it allows you to really take a step back and then ask yourself like what is the lie? So that's the next question is like what is the lie from what you are extracting? So someone says something, you're triggered, you're hurt by it. What are you extracting out of that? And how can you separate the thing that is the lie? So, yesterday we were coaching one of our clients, and she had shared with us that she was triggered. She was saying, I was just plugging along, doing what I needed to do. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if she got like a text message or a phone call or something, but somebody had said something to her that was very triggering. And so we were talking about it. And she said, well, this person has always told me that I will never amount to anything. I will never be successful. I will never achieve anything. And so, we asked like, okay, well, what's the lie in that? Like, and so she was able to very quickly recognize, I mean, she said like, oh, I know, like, oh, I know that's not true, but it still bothers me. And so how many of you can resonate with that? It's like, that if someone tells you, and maybe it's your kids, like if you guys have kids who struggle with their self-confidence and struggle with their self-esteem, and it doesn't matter if they're in elementary, middle school, high school, kids are mean. And, there's been so many times where my kids come home. This happened recently. One of my kids came home and he said something to me about what someone else said to him.
Mm,
And how hurtful it was. And so I'm having this conversation and I'm literally going through this, like, I truly went through this battle plan with this child. And so when we were talking about this, like, okay, what's the lie? He was able to pull out the lie. And so even though you're
yeah.
able to pull out the lie, it still is hurtful. And so that
Hmm.
leads to the last question.
Which is, what is the truth? And I think, you know, in general, I love that you said, you know, you went through this with your son, because I think too, part of our mission, the Kingdom Minded Mompreneur, is to teach and equip women not only how to have success in their business, but also in home, because ultimately, we are raising the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs, and that's incredibly exciting. And, if we learn how to overcome, other people's opinions and don't allow them to dictate our success and what is possible and available to us, we can step into what is the truth, right? Like, we can acknowledge and say, I know what is true. I know who I am. I know what God has called me to do. I know that this story is either a lie, or B, maybe there is truth to it. Maybe I do need to step up or do this thing, or accept, someone's apology, or apologize myself. Maybe there is truth to it, right? Or maybe there is truth that, in recognizing, okay, there needs to be a boundary. And I think equipping you as the mompreneur to be able to do this and successfully thrive in your business, a lot of people really struggle with that, rejection, and, just even sometimes it's not even being said. It's their own, they're making it up in their head,
Oh, that is
and,
so true. Yes, that is
like,
so true.
sometimes they're like almost like paralyzing themselves, and there's no action, and they don't even really, maybe one person said something to you and it has just caused you to, struggle. And so I just think, recognize, having in general, like, these core pillars for yourself of, like, this is the truth, this is who I am, this is what God has called me to do, and recognizing that there's going to be hard things, people are going to not understand your assignment, right? But it's not their assignment, it's yours. And so, is it always going to be easy? No, it's not. And it's going to be hurtful sometimes. I'm not going to say that, oh, now you are equipped, go along, you'll never have a problem. People are never going to say things to hurt your feelings. I would love to promise that, but it's just not true. But I think when you establish these things, when you say, this is what is true about who I am, where I'm going, that is when nothing will stop you. Truly. I mean, that is when, because if God has ordained something, I mean, literally, it's like his plan, right? For Jesus, if you walk through the genealogy, right, of Jesus, and you look at all the types of people and things that happened and had to come to pass in order, just like, even I was reading my girls, like like a little Bible devotional thing before bed. And Evelyn totally fell asleep in the middle of it, but Sarah was listening, and it was talking about the two women in Moses's life, right? And he, getting in the basket and going to, Pharaoh's daughter and all, that, but just the just the little things, right, that were able to come to be, that could have gone a completely different way. And so I think at the end of the day, I mean, literally the baby could have drowned in the basket, in the river. I mean, it's like the
But
child
God
could
had a
have been,
plan.
I mean, it's like the child, his sister could have been picked up by a guard. I mean, there's all of these things that could have happened. And I think, Moses was supposed to be murdered, like as a baby. And God, uses people to fulfill his promises. And, I think you may be raising someone, you may be raising a child that will go on to change millions of lives. But if you don't bother showing up and overcoming these obstacles, how can your child that you're modeling this behavior for step into something that they don't see as possible, right? Because you didn't live up to your potential. And I
Yeah.
just think this is such a powerful strategy, and definitely something that I believe, if consistently brought to light, the truth will set you free. That's my opinion.
Yes. So we're going to give you 3 action steps. So the 5 questions, I'm going to repeat them again. All right. Who am I? What has God called me to do? What is the story I am telling myself based on what was just said? What is the lie and what is the truth? Okay. So those are the questions. So the 3 action steps for you to take after you have walked through these questions are: the first thing you need to do is cling to the truth. Okay. Cling to the truth, because you're going to have that little voice in you that wants to hold to that lie, or wants to go back to feeling defeated or frustrated, or I can't believe they said this. Or, I mean, even sometimes, I'm not even going to get into it, but somebody said something to me recently that I was like, I can't believe they had the audacity to say that. And sometimes you can just let your mind continue to roll over. Like, did this
Mhm,
person
mhm.
really just say this? Or
Or
did they
even try to
really?
explain it, like justify, like, well, like, why would they, or convince, like, how can I convince them otherwise?
Right, right.
Right?
Or
Like,
prove
yes.
something, like, "Oh, I just wanna prove to them that I'm this, or prove to them that
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
that," or whatever, or prove. Anyway, I'm not even gonna get into it, but yes, I think you can, allow yourself to sit in that, and even just retelling the story. I feel like I can be guilty of that, of, like, I gotta
Mm,
tell my husband, I gotta tell my best friend, I gotta tell my mom, it's
yeah.
like retelling the story, and you just need to let it go. Especially if you're going to move up in different places. I think there's certain levels of, depending on where you are in your life and in your business. I think really there comes this place where you really have to grow in your maturity to say, I am not going to allow the things that I would allow to bother me a year ago.
Mhm.
I'm not going to allow them to bother me. I'm not going to give any energy to them. And
Exactly.
I'm not even going to complain about this, because I'm moving forward. The place that I'm moving towards in my life doesn't have the time or the energy to give into pettiness.
Mhm.
And so you have
Totally
to
agree.
recognize, like, where you're headed, and not even giving that energy. Okay, so the first one is to cling to the truth. The second one is to tell your battle buddy. So find someone who you are close to, that you can say, if you're still struggling, you can say, hey, this happened, and I am, I really want to not let this bother me. I really want to move forward. I really want to grow. Could you pray about this with me? Or could you pray
Mhm.
with me? Or could you, whatever. And I know, Becky and I have been that for each other. I think there's times where um, both of us have been through hard seasons throughout this last year. We both walked through different things, and there would be times where one or the other is like, um, just needs that supportive person. Not everybody can be your battle buddy. So make sure that the person who you are speaking to is somebody that cares about your success, that cares about you. I had heard recently in a podcast, actually, both of us were listening
Yeah.
to a
I was
podcast.
thinking about that exact thing.
Yeah. So Mel Robbins, she was talking about, who is it that you could tell good news to, who would be
Mhm.
excited for you? So maybe think about that person. Like, who is the friend that you could go to when you have really good news to say, like, oh my goodness, I just rank advanced. I just hit this thing. I just earned the trip.
Yeah.
And they would be like, way to go. I am rooting you
Yeah.
on.
Yes.
And then what is the third one?
So the third one is, this is actually something that one of our clients shared with us that she does. And we were like, this is so powerful, is to write out evidence of your success and put it somewhere where you can see it daily. And so what I mean by that, and what we want to encourage you to think through is, a lot of times as you're working on maybe something new or going into territory that is uncertain, or you haven't had success in that area, but reminding yourself, okay, you know what? I may not have hit diamond or whatever sparkle unicorn title, yet, but I have done blank, right? I have, had a really high sales month where I sold, $8,000 or something, right? I may not have ever had to lose. Like maybe you just had, you have all this baby weight, you just had a baby and you're like, I really want to lose like 30 pounds or 15 pounds or even, 5 pounds or whatever. Or maybe you're wanting to compete in like a physique competition. I don't know what you want to do, but maybe there's something out there. Maybe you want to set the tone for your day and start a morning routine and get up an hour earlier and have time for yourself. And maybe you've been telling yourself over and over, like, I sleep in and I'm not a morning person, or I'm this or that. Okay, well, what is some evidence to prove to yourself, right? If you're trying to lose weight, maybe put at the bathroom mirror, like, I ran a half marathon. I was the fastest person on my basketball team. And it doesn't even matter if it was like in high school, right? But just give yourself evidence of the truth, of something that you have had success in that area. So like if it's, for your business and you're working to hit a new goal, or you're struggling, sending your messages because you're worried about what people will say about you or whatever, focus more on, I made a new friend blank, right? Give yourself that confidence boost in a sense. It's kind of like your best friend being like cheering you on, right? And obviously we can't have our best friend cheering us on, like, in our pocket every single day as adults. It's just not realistic. So kind of give yourself that confidence boost when you sit down to work, or when you go to work out, or when you're struggling to put in the actions to align with the truth, right? And then when you do that, that is when you will begin to build out the life of your dreams, because you have to ignore, right? That whole concept of like delulu, like delusional, and like people being crazy. It's like, well, someone like Sarah Blakely, I'm sure people thought she was absolutely crazy, right? I'm sure people were like, you're going to make what? Like, you're going to like Spanx? Like, you're going to make something for women to wear like underneath their clothes, and you're going to charge what? I mean, let's just be honest. Like, I've worn some Spanx and I spent like $80 on it. So I'm just saying, like, they're the delusional people, the people that might not understand what God has called you to do. That's okay. You're going to love them where they're at. You're going to respect that they don't have to agree with you, or
and
maybe
that you don't have to explain yourself.
Yes.
I think
yes.
just recognizing that we don't have to stop and explain ourselves. I think that's one of the hardest things to do.
Yes. Oh my word,
because
yes.
you feel misunderstood. You feel like, well, they just don't know, or this is not my heart with this, or whatever. Instead of choosing, okay, so Mel Robbins has a podcast episode about let them. Like, let people think things about you. Let people say things about you. Let people talk about you. Like, don't worry about, if you're so focused on the direction of where you're headed, and mainly if you know that God has called you to something, you can't look back. Like, you can't look back and be concerned about what anybody says.
Yeah. Well, and just something to kind of end on, a perspective. There is a visual picture of Michael Phelps in one of his Olympic like races, and somebody beside him turned to look at where he was, and that lost them the race. And I just think, like, he could have beat Michael Phelps, but he was more worried about what he was doing. And Michael Phelps was not looking around, and I don't know, like, whatever, I'm not like a Olympic what guru. I don't know enough about it, but just that picture and that visual representation of, you've got to focus forward. You've got to focus on your calling, focus on what God has for you. And, the pieces will fall into place if you are willing to consistently show up, regardless of other people's opinions.
Thanks so much for listening to the Kingdom Minded Mompreneur. If you loved what you heard today, could you stop and give us a 5-star rating and review? It helps our visibility on podcasting platforms so others like you can hear more of this message.
Also, if this episode encouraged you, we would love for you to pass it along to your own biz bestie and anyone else who could benefit. Lastly, don't forget that if you want to hang out with us just a little bit more, join us inside the Kingdom Minded Mompreneur community. Click the link in the show notes. Bye for now.